Convergence Summit, Ask the Pros, and we are thrilled to be joined by our National Sportswriter of the Year, Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports, National Sportscaster of the Year, Sean McDonough from ESPN, and Hall of Fame inductee Adrian Wojnarowski, formerly of ESPN, now with his beloved Bonnies. So appreciate the time from all three of you guys. Round of applause. Come on. I thought I did everything that, merited that. Sweet. This is going to be totally Q&A. We don't have specific subject matter for me to get us started, so I'm going to very shortly walk around because I learned a handful of years ago when it was Ernie Johnson doing this. He had won National Sportscaster of the Year, and I said, "Hi, EJ, I'm Darren. I'm your moderator." And he looks around and he said, "Moderator? It's just me." Like, okay, here's the mic, and have at it. So we will start with questions for these guys. Okay, I'm going to start on the left side of the room first.
Hi there. My name's Claire. I have a question for Adrian. So, considering you were on the national level with your coverage as a reporter, now moving into the landscape that is mid-major sports in the GM role and this curation of NIL and where things are going, what are you seeing the trends when it comes to budgeting within athletic departments that might not be able to fund smaller sports coverage? Because I think for a lot of us, that's where a lot of our reps get, right? So where are you watching some of that funding move from some of the higher sports, such as a men's basketball or football program, trickle down into the landscape of budgeting?
Do you mean budgeting for the programs themselves, or you're talking about the outlets that cover us?
The programs themselves, so such as like your ESPN Plus coverage, where are where is that falling in more of the external coverage, right? Because communications would need some digital coverage, some of the creative side per se. How is that all being spread throughout, and what are you seeing being favored in some of these decisions at a mid-major level?
Well, I do think the ESPN Plus model has been tremendous for what the term the minor sports, non-football, non-basketball. And I think, too, for opportunities for students, it didn't exist when I was a student. We might have the campus radio station, might do baseball or women's basketball, but now you could see kids getting reps, women's soccer, men's and women's lacrosse, baseball, softball. And if you want to watch almost any Division I team in the country in any sport, whether it's ESPN Plus or Flow Sports, like I'll watch potential portal guys, and you're on Flow Sports because you might be looking at Division II. You might be looking at, some of the Division I conferences have them. So I've got all these subscriptions that you're trying to keep track of all your passwords. But I do think it's opened up more opportunity. But financially, there's no question the money being spread around. We've got to raise it, especially a school like ours. We're not funded at we're in the Atlantic 10, which is half of our league. You could make the case they're really high majors. We're a school with 2,000 students, a very remote area. We don't have a city and a business infrastructure to draw from. So that's a challenge. But I do think in terms of people seeing your teams, there's more opportunity than ever because of ESPN Plus and those, across the board in almost every sport you have.
Woj, first of all, congratulations, or Adrian. Can I refer to you as Woj?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Woj, first of all, congratulations on the Hall of Fame induction. You revolutionized the way that basketball and transactions are kind of perceived by the fan. And I want to see, from a versatile perspective, coming out of college, you want to write, you want to be on TV, you want to break news, all of that. How do you go in from your experience into the field and then kind of do it all, or not necessarily put yourself in a box, which is what we saw from your career?
Well, I thought my timing, I'm not sure about revolutionizing anything. I thought my timing was unique. Went to Yahoo in 2007, and you look at what Yahoo is still doing with news, and we had a group of people, Dan Wetzel and Jeff Passan and Charles Robinson and Tim Brown, really talented group of people who news was important to, and editors who it mattered to, and you still see them doing that with Ross now, and they continue that through the years. I thought my timing, 2010 changed the NBA when LeBron and Chris Bosh went to Miami. And I thought it changed the way we covered the NBA, people's interest. It was people's interest in the transactions and the salary cap. And, hey, this team's clearing space because they want to make a run at LeBron. And these two teams are clearing space to try to get 2 max players or 3 max players. And that part of it became much more interesting to people. And then you combine, going to Yahoo and the internet, this 24-hour news cycle, and then Twitter comes along, and now there's this instantaneous. I remember the first significant story on the NBA I broke on Yahoo. It was Greg Oden, unfortunately, had a knee injury right after he got drafted number 1, and it was right at the beginning of training camp. And I mean, I wasn't on Twitter. This is 2000, maybe 2008. I remember I wrote a story. I filed the story. The story got posted on the site. And I'm waiting for someone to see it. Like, I'm refreshing, and finally, like, maybe 45 minutes after it was up, I saw AP put an alert out. And, fast forward a few years, and you would have it on Twitter, and you would send your news story. And I thought it was the timing of when I started doing the NBA, and there just became this tremendous appetite for information. And in some cases, it reminded me a little bit of college recruiting, right? There was college football, there was football season, and there was college recruiting season. And Ross knows this, and Sean doing college football. There was always sometimes more interest in the recruiting than the actual games, and then the NBA started to follow that path, I thought.
Hi guys, my name is Wyatt Kopelman. I work at Learfield over in Winston-Salem. My question's for Sean. Sean, you've worked a lot of broadcasts nationally, radio-wise as well, local audiences. What feedback do you think actually helped you grow very quickly early in your career, and what criticism or other pointers do you think you learned to ignore early on?
It's a great question. I started out doing the Red Sox games in 1988, and the feedback I got immediately from the players was that I was too negative, critical. And when you're young and you're the son of a NSMA Hall of Famer, dealing with the nepotism part of it, it was kind of a hard way to start. But what I learned, and I've tried to keep this as my philosophy, is, we're there to, and this is ESPN's mission statement, we're there to serve the viewer or the listener. And that's what I learned early on. I'm there to, I hope, serve the people who are watching or listening. And so I try to talk about whatever I think I would be thinking about as I was sitting on my couch watching the game on TV. Why don't they bunt? Why don't they go for that 4th down? Whatever it might be. That's to me, that's the most important thing. I just think you need to develop your own style and be comfortable with it and have it be authentically you. And that's what I've tried to be. And I hope it's worked well. It's still, I still can't wrap my arms and mind around this, quite frankly. But just feel incredibly blessed to have had all these opportunities that you referenced over the years.
Can I add one thing about those early Red Sox days? As a
Yes.
Red Sox fan who grew up in New England.
I wasn't sure there were going to be many Red Sox days the way it started, to be quite honest. But
So Nesson would run, the New England Sports Network would run remember the almanac shows you would do at the end of each season? Mm-hmm. And so this was like 3 or 4 months ago, and every once in a while I'll watch them. It was like the Red Sox teams of my high school and college years. And so I taped a bunch of these almanac shows. They were half-hour shows, you recapping.
can I pay you to burn them now?
87, 80, 89. But it's funny you say that because I recently noticed, I was like, Sean was really blunt in these. This team wasn't good. That bullpen was terrible. And Sean said it. And it's funny you say that. It was different than and it was accurate. Like, how do we sugarcoat this, season when there was no pitching and you didn't? And like listening to it now, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would find it fun or not. Like a lot of us probably, you watch some of the old tapes and you cringe.
Hey guys, Drew Bonifant with the Portland Press Herald. This is for Adrian and Ross. What are your tips on source building, and how do you kind of find that middle ground between, you want to be, getting close to them and everything while also maintaining that objective distance? What's kind of the way to go about that?
Go ahead. This guy's doing it. So.
You did it. Woj ran so I could walk, is what's happened. He got up on stage and he saw me with my phone open and he said, yeah, that's your world now, not mine. So I'm jealous of him that he can turn off his phone now. So I get this question a lot, and it's a good one. I think young journalists are too concerned often about how they write, being a good writer. Forget about the writing. And report and focus on reporting and building relationships and breaking news and uncovering things that haven't been unearthed. And the way to do that is to build relationships. And I think in every profession, even beyond journalism, right, it's kind of all about relationships and getting to know people. I often tell people, how am I supposed to write accurately about an industry if I don't know the people in the industry? So I get to know them as much as I can. And that line you mentioned is hard. It's a hard line not to cross. And I think to a degree, all of us who excel at the daily breaking news cross that line, unfortunately, because it's hard not to get so close to someone. And I had an incident this past fall where I was close to someone of very much importance in college sports, and I had to report a negative story involving him. And it was a relationship that went from 10 to 1 very quickly. And I've had to work to build that relationship back up. But there's a certain level of story, as Woj knows, that you have to report and write. But the bottom line, to get back to your question, is relationships. And the question often is, well, how do you build relationships? And it's just like, how do you build a friendship or anything in life, right? It's go out with somebody, get to know them, coffee, beer, dinner, ask about their family. Don't talk work necessarily, and get to know them a little better. And that's really helped me sort of build relationships. And then I think when you get to a certain point in your career where you are writing and breaking news on a daily basis in an industry, then you sort of get the respect of others in the industry, and then you're getting reach out from them, and that just grows your sort of web. And so that's how I would answer that.
I've always believed the guts of great writing is great reporting. And we've all been there, whether you're doing a term paper in school or whether you're writing for the campus paper or whether you're writing professionally. If you don't have great material, if you haven't done your work and you try to write yourself out of that hole, you can't. You can't. And you don't have to be the greatest wordsmith. You're a better wordsmith when you have better material, and when you've talked to multiple sources, when you've followed up, when you're really knowledgeable about what you're writing and reporting on, and then breaking news comes from that over time. And that's how I started. When I went to Yahoo full time, I was a newspaper columnist. I only ever dreamed of being a newspaper columnist. Sean's dad, Will McDonough, 25 years ahead, changed the trajectory of what newspaper guys like me could do, that we could have information and go on TV with it. And no one had ever done it before Will McDonough. And he changed, started to change the industry, and guys like Chris Mortensen, who I got to work with for a few years at ESPN, who was just, great to all of us younger guys coming up, was just somebody who really emulated, took it as television news, or the Sunday pregame shows and news and information were really important to ESPN. It opened a lot of doors for guys like us, but I think in terms of the relationships, it's, a lot of it is call people when you don't need anything. Like you can't just call somebody when it's this time of year, right? NBA free agency, or the draft or these high volume periods. I always said it's a 365-day investment in time, and it wasn't uncommon, I don't think, for me to have 50, 60, 70, 80 conversations with somebody before I ever was really going to them, something was happening. And if you have this constant conversation with the people you cover, the news starts to find you, and it also keeps you anticipating what's coming. I always thought if you had to sit in your newsroom as a college reporter or in a newsroom in a newspaper, if you need an editor to tell you what the story is to go out and do, you're probably not doing the job great. You should be being able to anticipate what's coming based on these conversations you're having day in and day out, and getting ahead on the world with which that might be school board, that might be covering City Hall, that might be covering what the next college football playoff system is going to look like.
Yeah, don't wait for the assignment to be given to you. Go create the assignment yourself. And if you have enough relationships and contacts in whatever industry you're covering, you should be able to have ideas on what those assignments and stories should be.
I'm so envious of your voice too. I didn't know that. Reading your stuff.
I said cigar a couple nights ago.
There you go. That's all right. It's interesting conversation for me to listen to, because I lived it growing up in our house with my dad. But, back in the day, he got criticized a lot. He's too close to the people he covered. He shouldn't be golfing with Bill Parcells or playing racquetball with Red Auerbach. And my dad didn't give a crap, And
he still wrote the tough story.
He did. And now, but I don't even think anybody worries about that anymore, do they? I mean, hearing what Ross just you got to build relationships. They become your friends, and that's how you get information. And you're going to cover them. The whole I have to keep my objective distance seems to have gone out the window.
Well,
and I'm not saying that's good or bad.
There was a fairly high-profile reporter in the NFL recently that got a little close to a coach. And those things, when all that happened, I remember thinking to myself, in my career, what was that moment? Did I ever have anything near that? I didn't have anything ever close to that, right? But you always think, should I have not had beers with this person on a patio somewhere in New York City? Who saw me and who's taking pictures?
Yeah.
I mean, those things come to your head. But you're right, Sean. I do think in this day and age, it's a little different. I think, how people view it.
I'm Mario Bedingfield from Austin Peay State University. First of all, thank you, gents, for being up here and sharing your information with us today. And this question is for Sean McDonough. What is the importance between the balance of using the monitor and also looking out at what's going on the field? Yeah.
It's a great question. I think that a lot of the people who do play-by-play in this room would probably answer it differently. And a lot of times it's dependent upon where the booth is. How far are you from the field or the ice? I've never really called hockey off the monitor because it's just too hard to do. And the monitors are small. Football, I try to, as soon as the play ends, I always look at the monitor, because I think our job, as much as anything else, is to put captions on pictures. And one of the things I learned from the late, great Syracuse legend Marty Glickman, when he was late in his career and was coaching broadcasters, was, look at the monitor. You're supposed to be talking about what the people at home are looking at, and match what you say to the. So, in football, I will basically watch the monitor between plays, and then when the ball is snapped or close to being snapped, I'll look up and call it off the field, because sometimes in the monitor you don't see that the safety fell down. He's not where in your peripheral vision, if you're looking out at the field, you do. So, but it can even vary within game to game. I just think you need to do what's most comfortable, but I do think more of us need to be watching the monitor and talking about what the people are seeing. And we can control some of that too, because we have talkback buttons where we can talk to the producer or director and say, hey, after this play, if nothing happens, I'd like to tell a story about Woj or something, and then they'll give you the shot. So, Yeah, but it's a great question. Are you an aspiring play-by-play person? Good for you. It's a blessing. It's a great way to make a living.
Gentlemen, congratulations on your respective honors this weekend. And I know I can speak on behalf of everybody else here. It's an honor to meet you all and have you here with us in Greensboro. This is an industry where we work where others don't. And anyone who wants a 9 to 5, it's very rare in the sports media scene. So a question for all of you, how have you found is a good way to balance not just your work life, but your stress levels, and especially for guys like Sean, who you work multiple sports and have a minimal amount of time off. Woj, you've certainly worked in that during your time with ESPN, but how do you achieve that sort of work-life balance?
Oh, yeah, look at me. One thing is helpful. I don't have children. So my colleagues and competitors, sometimes I wonder how they do it with a family. Because I can barely do it without a family. And my wife was certainly understanding and was in a similar career, as me as a reporter, so she understands it. I don't really know how to answer that because I haven't found how to turn it off. And when I turn it off, and I guess I have every now and then, I find it harder to turn it back on. So I don't turn it off a lot. And I think, when I can get away for stretches, whether it's beach or skiing or something like that, I try to turn it off. But as Woj mentioned, the 24/7 sort of news cycle, it is really difficult. My dad here is on the front row, and today we went to downtown Greensboro just to explore a little bit, and I think I had, 6 to 8 calls in the 3 hours. I could maybe not take that call, but I kind of didn't get to where I am because I ignored a call. You just have to do it, and that's just the approach I take.
I think it's hard to answer your question. We do work unusual hours. There are some benefits. A lot of what I do is on the weekend. So if you really don't want to go to someone's wedding or your graduation party, it's kind of a built-in excuse. But there are times you really do want to go to those things and you can't. But to me, the people part of it is always the most important. I have about 25 family and friends who come down for this, and it's been super emotional. Last night we had dinner and just told stories, and to me that should always be your priority. The people, your family, the people who are, your faith, the people who are closest to you. And you can do both. It's hard because these jobs are time consuming, but I think if you manage your time correctly, you can achieve the right balance, and you will.
I would say that I felt you could be successful at two things. You could do your job, and you could have a family. You can't have a third thing. You can't have hobbies. And certainly there's plenty of times you're going to shortchange your family and the time you spend with them if you want to do this at a high level. But not just this. There's almost any profession. If you want to do it at a really high level, there's just going to be sacrifices on your time. But I would say you can't have a third thing in your life if you want to be really, really good. I do think you can have, you can prioritize your family, but you can't, for me anyway. Now, maybe there's others who I've seen do it, and it's not one size fit all. But for me, I didn't golf. I didn't, collect cards. I don't know. I didn't have a third thing. If I wasn't working, I was with my family, and there really was not ever a time that there was a third thing you could do. And I'm not sure there's much of a way around that.
Yeah, somebody recently, about a month ago, said this to me that, on a stove, you got your 4 burners, right? The work, family, fun, health. And you probably can't have all the burners on. So you're going to have 3 going, or as Woj said, maybe even 2, and one or 2 of those is going to have to be sacrificed, unfortunately, if you want to be really good at the others. And it's unfortunate, but it's just sort of the way it is.
And I think family members understand that, right? I mean, they're supportive of what you do, Woj does, I do. That's part of it too.
My wife's here, so you can ask her tonight.
Okay.
James Boyd with The Athletic. Adrian, for you, you walked away from one of the most high-profile sports jobs in the world, probably. How did you balance this is the dream that I've attained versus I want to do something else when that is the job that a lot of people aspire to have? Not me. I don't envy anything that you ever had to do, but just that part of it.
It's a good question. Listen, I never imagined doing anything but being a sports writer. I just wanted to be a sports writer. I just wanted to have a career in newspapers. Never imagined any of what it became. I mean, I never imagined. I grew up a mile and a half from ESPN. I grew up in Bristol, and I used to play basketball at the boys club with Tom Mees, who was one of the original Sports Center anchors, and I used to see Bob Lee at the gas station, when I was a kid. And then, but I never really there weren't sports writers there. There weren't. And then that became, the further along I went, so that ended up being where I ended up. But I didn't spend my career thinking about wanting to work at ESPN. And so I loved the craft of it. I loved the angst of writing and rewriting and the newspaper deadlines. And then it evolved into something else. I went to Yahoo, and now you've got this 24-hour news cycle, and I'm specializing in just one sport in the NBA, and then from there to ESPN. And a friend of mine, Lee Jenkins, who I thought was probably the best magazine writer of my generation, and Lee wrote any number of Sports Illustrated cover stories, and he went to the Clippers in their front office, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and he said something to me. I was talking to him about my decision and what I might do, and he said, it stayed with me. He said, it's okay to say you did it. You don't have to do it forever. And I'm proud of the career I had, and I just sort of did it as long as I felt that I wanted to. I just felt like I had done what I wanted to do, and I wanted to experience some different things professionally in my life. But again, I never in my career set out to say, hey, I want to be a college basketball general manager. That was not it. And I'll do it here for as long as I do it, and that'll be that. But if you would have told me that probably as a young person that I would be there and walk away from it, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But it wasn't that hard of a decision. I just kind of knew it was time. I just felt like it was over. I just felt like it was over for me. And there's really not been one day. I know this time of year, trade or draft and free agency, I've not had a day where I said, hey, I wish I was still doing it. I'm glad I did it and had a lot of fun. But I don't look back. I keep trying to look forward and seeing what's next.
My name's Dominic Petrillo, a failed sports writer from Philadelphia. I have a comment for Adrian and a question for Ross. For Adrian, I'm going to be the 75,000th person to thank you for what you did and everything. I was forced to walk away from work 13 years ago due to everything: diabetes, transplant, kidney failure, blindness, amputation, and others. So when I was forced to do that, I decided to try and go to my dream and become a sports writer, which I've always loved. And I've been failing for the past 13 years, and I was ready to give up. And then when you did what you did, I realized that you made your dream, you did everything you had to do, and then now you're able to do what you want to do and you have a passion for. And I still have a passion and a dream to make it. So it brought me back invigorated, and I've had gone through more stuff since then with potential cancer and stuff, but it's still keeping me motivated to keep going even though I'm failing at it. So I just want to thank you. And for Ross, I know currently on College Football Inquirer with On3 and on Yahoo, you're currently playing a lawyer. And I know that you're going through everything with the SAVE Act and the Protect Student Athletes Act and everything. Do you enjoy being able to just focus on one area and topic right now, or are you waiting for the day when this is finally passed and you can get back to doing more plethora of different articles?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. It sounds like you have an amazing story, and failure almost always leads to success. So you can think you're failing, but eventually keep on failing, right? And it will eventually lead to success. I failed a lot when I was younger. Didn't ever think I would get to the level anywhere near this level. So you may think you're failing now, but really you're just continuously trying to get to the next level, and that's what we all do. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I think I had at least a flint of a moment that Woj had, which was, do I really want to do this anymore? I was sort of tired of writing about the left guard or the backup quarterback or where some offensive line coach would next go. And I would just sort of got exhausted, even of sometimes covering games, and would forget about what game I covered when in the play, and did I really care anymore? And then came all the off the field crap. And I felt like I was the only one in my profession to like run to the fire and want to get burned a little bit, because I was sort of getting bored with all this other stuff. And so for me, and I get this question a lot, is, golly, don't you miss covering games and writing, player features and writing about depth charts? And absolutely not. And I don't think that I'll ever go back, because I don't think what I'm reporting about, which is the evolution of college athletics, is ever stabilizing, right? I mean, it's always going to keep moving. Now, it might get to a point where it's more stable than now, but it's going to keep on evolving. And so I'm going to keep on having this sort of niche job that I've sort of created 3 or 4 years ago. And so I've found it as a almost new lease on sports writing. It's not really sports writing, right? It's like sports business writing or all that. And now it's become sports political reporting. So it's given me sort of like this push to continue, because, probably right around COVID or a year or two after COVID, it sort of dawned on me like, God, do I want to keep doing this? And this has sort of driven me forward.
Sir, what did you say your name was again? Dominic. I would say this, first of all, what you said is very moving, and I admire your desire to do this and to keep working at it. Success in this field is not working at ESPN or Yahoo, and the most talented people I've ever been around in almost all cases are at the local level. There's so many people at the local level that I've worked with who, if they wanted to have moved up, quote unquote moved up, they could have. People love serving their communities. They love telling stories in the communities they live in. That's tremendous success. And when I think of my career, other people might think more of when I was maybe, I was 37 years old when I went to Yahoo. Nobody had ever heard of me. I mean, really hadn't. And really into my 40s. And I think of my time in Waterbury, Connecticut, where I was for 4 years, covering local sports and college basketball and, Fresno, California, and, the Bergen Record. And those are really a lot of my best memories of the business, because that's what I imagined. The rest of it became, ESPN's almost this make-believe world of stuff. And so doing it the way you're doing it at a local level and working in the community that you live in, there's a lot that's gratifying and fulfilling about that. And so again, success is measured in the struggle and the tenacity you have to do the job and to get better at the craft. And that's all. I think anybody in this room, I see the kids from Austin P and these places, we were all sitting there. I mean, I graduated from college. I didn't have a job. I had a dorm full of rejection letters, back when they would write you a rejection letter. And so I think of the struggle. I think of how hard it was to make sort of incremental progress in your career and how much better it made you. And so you should be really proud of what you're doing.
Amen.
My name is Luke Lundler. I'm a student at Arizona State University. I just want to say thank you guys for talking to us today. And nobody makes it to where you guys have made it and will continue to make it in this industry by being like everybody else. How did you separate yourselves throughout the years in this industry, and what did you focus on to make sure you are always being authentic?
Really, it's a hard question for me to answer because I think I just tell students when I speak at colleges, like the most important thing to me is to be yourself. I think the people who have been most successful in what I do are genuinely themselves. I use the example of Bill Raftery all the time. I think Raf's popularity is largely because he is the same person on the air as he is off. Everybody's nodding their head because he's just an amazing human being who has that same enthusiasm for whatever he does, whether it's on or off the air. So, I would say whatever, your natural disposition, we have this a lot in play-by-play. Some people are candid. Some people are complete homers. We need a base hit. I'm not a part of the team. I want the team to win. But we don't play for the team. That's okay. If people want to broadcast games that way, they should. But I think the most important thing is to do whatever comes naturally to you and be yourself.
That's great advice. I would say we talked about earlier the question about relationships. You either enjoy being around people and hanging out with them, or you don't. And the people who don't, it's fine, but you're probably not going to build a lot of relationships, right? So, and sometimes you have to force yourself to go to this event to hang out with this person. But if it's going to be beneficial for your career and work, and maybe even your life in general, then you got to do it. So I think, for me, it's two things. It's building relationships, wanting to hang out with people, liking, enjoying people's company. That's what I feel like I have. And two, just working a lot, right? Sacrificing certain things in your personal life for your work. And those are just two things that when I look at the landscape of how I separate myself.
I think you asked about trying to build something that's unique and authentic to you to make it, and you have to be okay with getting criticized, and you have to be able to anytime you put yourself out there, you put your work out there, there's going to be criticism for lots of different reasons, and you've got to try to take the criticism from the people you respect and who want you to get better, who are invested in you, and be able to listen to it and be honest with yourself. And then there's some of it you've got to be able to really try to ignore and not let get into your psyche and not let it, because it can have an impact on, even I think subconsciously, well, I don't want to take chances, because if I take a chance and I don't do well with it, I'm going to get criticized. That's what I miss about, working at a small newspaper. If I wrote a terrible, and I wrote many, terrible column or just tried something that didn't work, the whole world didn't see it. And then there became a time where it was a good thing if you were young and you were doing good work because of social media, because of the internet, more people had access to your work. I'm glad people didn't have access to my work when I was 23 and 24. I probably would have not made it much longer. And so I think that's harder now for young people. And, but I think being able to, there's so many different areas you've got to, if you're going to work in media, you're going to have to write, you're going to have to be able to talk on air, you're going to have to be able to do a podcast, you're going to have to, be on television, whatever it is. And not everyone's going to be your strength. They all weren't my strengths. And you have to be willing to kind of work through it and go through some tough times and know there's going to be some criticism. but that can't make you kind of go back into a shell. And that's hard to do.
Brendan Gulick. I'm a freelancer based out of Cleveland. Work for Big Ten Network and NCAA.com, and actually have worked with Ross a little bit doing some Ohio State on SI coverage. Sean, specifically for you, I think one of the things people most admire about your ability is how smooth and sharp you seem to be at multiple sports. And that's a muscle that not a lot of people get a chance to rep, let alone flex on a big stage. How do you stay sharp, especially in the off season when you're not calling a specific sport, and make sure that you can continue to have your fastball?
Well, I'm glad that you think I still do. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I say this all the time. I think other people could do all these different sports, and some do. I think it's the same skill, right? It's describing what you see. It's hopefully adding other information at the right time, whether it's stats or storytelling, interacting with your partner, with the truck. It's a transferable skill. You just have to understand the sports, how they're played, the strategy, the people involved, the rules. So when I grew up as my father's son, following my dad around, I wanted to do all the sports because I loved all the sports. We went to all the Boston sports teams games, and I didn't care which sport I did. I just wanted to do them all. So as I reflect back on my career, that's the thing. Like, people ask me all the time, which sport do you enjoy the most? And I always answer, well, I think it's the one I'm doing now. If you ask me during hockey season, I'd say hockey. If you ask me during college football, well, what could be better than college football and the games we get to do? So the thing that I've enjoyed most about my career, and I feel enormously blessed, is that I have had a chance to do all of these different things. And, in terms of staying sharp, you have to keep up with it. It goes to some of the other questions about balancing your time. You can't, and some of it's hard for us, to be honest. Greg McElroy is going to be here tonight. In college football, we don't get our schedule till 6 days ahead of time. So it's not like I know I have the University of Texas next month and I'm going to get a jump on that. I don't know if I'm going to see them at all. So you have to almost do a crash course every week. Our hockey schedule, we get way ahead of time. But as we all know now, and I found out the hard way when we got back into hockey 5 years ago, there's no time for storytelling. The first year we came back, I was, sends it in the corner, blah, blah, blah. And, his mother has a great stamp collection, and they score. You're like, oh, God. So, so the game's just so fast. So, you have to pick the right spot to do that. But as much as you can, get a head start on the prep, because the prep is the most important thing by far.
Nick Pierce, play-by-play, Liberty Flames Sports Network, and PA for the Carolina Panthers. Sean, I think I told you this after a Panthers game a couple months ago. I remember your play-by-play on CBS in the playoffs, the baseball playoffs in the early 90s. You've done so much. Your longevity is something I've always admired. Just now, my question would be, ESPN play-by-play announcers, what does the network value? What does that role look like now compared to what it was, 20, 30 years ago?
Right. And it's a great question. And I think it changes all the time because it depends on who's in charge. As Woj knows, at ESPN, there's a lot of changes in management. Who's the coordinating producer of college football, college basketball, hockey? Those things seem to change a lot. And, the gentleman behind you, the Sun Devil, who asked the question about, being unique and it's one of the reasons why I think we have to just be ourselves, because the reality is, if you try to develop a style or whatever that you think some people are going to like, some people may like it, but other people aren't going to like it. And that's what Woj was saying about being able to take criticism. No one is in our business is universally well liked. I might think someone's a great play-by-play person. You might think he or she's terrible. So that's the nature of it. You have to accept that. So, I don't really know. I just try to keep doing my job and hope that the people who do the hiring like it. I'm too old and cranky to change. So it's, I don't know about the cranky part. Am I cranky? I'm not that cranky. But but you never know, right? And that's the hard part of it, especially for some of the younger people in the room who are trying to get started. it's what job you're applying for and what is the person looking for. And, the people who do the hiring listen to these tapes for maybe 5 minutes. I always tell young people, put the best thing at the very beginning, because I sent a lot of tapes from the Harvard of Central New York and Arizona State, outstanding Cronkite school. And, most of the time we don't listen that long. So anyway, sorry for the long rambling answer, but I'm just going to keep doing what I do and hope that ESPN keeps giving me the opportunity to do it, because I still love it. It's as I've said many times, it's such a blessing. And there's new things all the time. I mean, like, what people ask, what else do you want to do? Well, a year and a half ago, we did the first college football playoff game ever on a campus, and it was at Notre Dame, which I grew up wanting to go to Notre Dame. I've said a bunch of times, God has a plan for our lives, and Notre Dame had a plan for my life, and it did not include me going to Notre Dame. So I wound up at Syracuse, which was the plan, because it turned out to be the best. And then we had the Four Nations face-off. So there are always new and exciting things to keep the interest level high.
I want to add one thing to what Sean said, and that's why I respect and spending almost 8 years at ESPN and understanding that so much of it is very subjective with whether it's a play-by-play person, an analyst, a sports center anchor, and management can change, and they can have a very different view of you than the previous person. And the one thing for guys like me, and I don't know if I speak for Ross with this, but Sean and I share an agent or an agency. You're Matt Kramer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's here.
Kramer's here, and
he was very disappointed in your career change, because I think you cost him a little money too when you.
Yeah, he was out in my yard like
begging you to stay at ESPN. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, but he said something to me early on when I was sort of going from Yahoo to ESPN, and Schefter and I talked about this too. And Adam is, so good on TV. He's just good. He's good at all of it. And but when you have information, I always tell young reporters this at ESPN. I want to be on TV more, and I'd say, well, break news. Whether you're tall or short, male, female, whatever your background is, they can't deny you if you have the story. And they can say, I don't love you on TV, I don't love your delivery, your style. But if you've got information nobody else has, or you have it first, you're going to get on air. And I would, and so, Kramer would say to me, it doesn't matter what you look like meaning balding, pudgy guy, listen, and Will McDonough was not from Central Casting.
He would say he was not cosmetically correct.
Right, but you know what? Will had stories. Your dad had stories nobody else did, and there weren't people on sports shows who looked like Will McDonough when he started.
No,
so I think that all of us are going to come at this from a different place, and your ability to break through is often. It may not be the same for Sean McDonough or Ross or for me or for you, but there's usually a pathway, and you got to be honest with yourself about what do you think it is for you, and certainly play to your strengths, work on your weaknesses, and you'll be ready when opportunity comes.
My brother Ryan is here. I think we talk about building sources. I think he might have occasionally talked to you when he was the GM of the Phoenix Suns. Go Suns. John Bloom, congratulations. I'm going to tell him that you said our dad was ugly in front of this room. Our dad would have been the first one to say it. Well, I'll talk about it later tonight, I guess, but this has been a particularly emotional experience for me, because the day my dad found out he was going into the NSMA Hall of Fame. Back then it was Sportscasters and Sportswriter Association. January 9th, 2003 was the day he died. He listened to his messages at the Boston Globe, which he never did. Had a message from Barbara Lockhart from this organization saying, you're going to be the Sportswriter Hall of Fame inductee. Thank God Ryan was home from North Carolina at the time on Christmas break. And my dad hung up the phone and told Ryan, I just found out I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. And then 2 hours later, he dropped dead of an undiagnosed heart disease. So it's particularly meaningful for our family to be here, and our dad is, and I'm so grateful to him, right? Because I have people say the same thing you said to me all the time about him. You know, Peter King told me that, Shefty, every time I see him, you know, if it wasn't for your dad, this might not have worked. You know, if he did it first and failed, then maybe people wouldn't have kept doing this.
He was a bigger than life figure, and you mentioned, I didn't know your brother Ryan as well when he was with the Celtics, and I knew him a little bit. I don't even think I had his number saved in my phone, and I don't think he would mind me telling the story. I'm not going to say what story it was. It was big, but it involved another team or another thing going on in the league. And I saw 617 in my phone, and I answered it. And he said, hey, it's Ryan McDonough with the Celtics. I want to give you a heads up. There's a thing we're out of now, but I think it's going this way. Mm-hmm. And it was big. And
you're welcome.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And but what he said to me was he had a very kind compliment to me about your dad and maybe how I was going about the job, and it meant the world to me. He said, like, I know we don't know each other well, but you, and I think about that a lot. And because your dad he changed as much as you put a Mount Rushmore of guys who changed this industry. He's on it.
Yeah.
And so,
thank you.
Yeah, there's no question.
We got just one more.
Sure. Promise I'll keep it brief. Hey, all right, I appreciate everybody for taking the time. Thank you all for joining us today. Question specifically for Sean. I'm a play-by-play guy. I'm in my 5th season in single A, and one thing I'm always trying to improve on is keeping the same energy every game, whether it's a Tuesday and we have 500 people in the stands versus a sellout crowd on a Saturday night, where it's a little easier to bring the crowd mic into my broadcasts. But something that you're fantastic with, that I appreciate about every game that you call, is that you're very energetic and that you bring a lot of intensity to your calls. What are some ways that you've helped yourself kind of understand the big moments of the games and when to step in and use your intense calls or to step back and use the crowd mic? Right. And off of that, what are some ways that you're caring for your voice? Obviously, calling all these games, vocal care is such a huge thing.
Yeah, that's a particularly a problem. And I know Pete and some of the other hockey people in here, you know, when you get in the playoffs and the games are day after day and they're very intense and you're in arenas like here at Carolina and Vegas, that are so loud, you know, that's a really hard part. And I think it's as much as you can, sleep, you know, all the things voice doctors would tell you, get as much rest as you can, stay hydrated. You know, those are the most important. Don't drink. I don't have any beverages during the hockey playoffs just because it's, you know, it's, but the energy level night tonight does come from all the pregame drinking that we do. Meet 2 hours before kickoff in the Red Elephant Club down there in Alabama and have a couple. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I just think the energy level comes from, I'm truly excited to be there, you know, and when, and I love sports. It doesn't even matter who's playing. You know, I love the competition, love watching it. And to me, that's the fun part of play-by-play, that you're a part of it while it's going on in the moment. And, you know, I just think, the energy question too, like now I hear so many people who are like screaming from when the game starts, like they think I'm supposed to be excited, so I'm going to be excited. And then you don't really leave yourself any place to go when it actually is exciting. So that's one thing I would say to the young, aspiring play-by-play people, you know, be excited when the situation, you know, our voice inflection, our volume, the words we choose should match what's happening in the game at that moment. And, you know, I think sometimes people you should just call it how it's instinctively feeling to you in the moment. And then, you know, hope your voice doesn't crack. You know, it's, I used to be embarrassed by that. Now I really don't care anymore. You know, it's like, if it helps people remember it, then so be it.
Love it. Great way to end it. Appreciate these guys. Round of applause.
Thank you, Darren.